So, speaking from experience, there is no worse feeling in the world for a system administrator than for when you turn on your Linux system and everything starts to boot up and you never get a command prompt. There's a lot going on in the background when you push that power button. I mean, first of all, you have the firmware is performing power on self-test and it's searching for a bootloader. And once it finds the bootloader is looking for the kernel. And then the kernel, once the bootloader finds the kernel starts loading all the system files and config files that tell the computer what to do and set up your environment for you. And so there's a lot that can go wrong in the background that can cause you to not receive a command prompt when your computer comes on. And today we're going to learn about the two main reasons that these issues usually fall under. Kernel panic, also known as kernel failure, is when Linux crashes because the kernel stops running in memory. Software changes are usually the culprit behind this particular issue here. For example, installing a new kernel but without the appropriate library changes. Most of the time you can fix this by using an alternate login method. For example, signing in single user mode or selecting an old kernel version at the boot menu, and then editing the necessary files once you're able to get into the system. Probably the biggest cause of failed boot in Linux is when the kernel has been upgraded. It's always a good idea if you're upgrading the kernel to keep the old kernel in place and add an additional entry in the grub menu that points to the new kernel, such as this example to the side here. That way, if the new kernel fails to boot, you can reboot to the grub menu and select the old kernel because it's still available there in the grub menu for you. And then once you are logged in, you can inspect the files and see what's going on. Most distributions of Linux do this automatically whenever they upgrade the kernel. Another alternate method of logging in is to use single user mode. If you're working in a server environment and need to perform maintenance, and you want to boot up the system without allowing multiple users to connect while you are working, single user mode is a useful way to do that. Because as the name implies, it only allows the one login by the root profile. To get into single user mode, you simply click E while you're at the grub menu that's on your screen, which will open the command line. And then once you're there, you'll look for the line that starts with Linux, and then go to the end of that line and just type in the word single, and then hit enter. And what this does, it tells the system to boot into run level 1. This allows only for one person to log in and only for the root user to log in this one time. Then once you're logged in, you can take a look at the necessary files and look for any corruption in the system. Or if you're doing this for maintenance reasons, you can perform the needed maintenance. So I'm going to show you real quick on my Ubuntu virtual machine how to do this. Typically, Ubuntu hides the grub menu during the process. What you simply have to do to see it is that when you click Start, and it starts to come up, as everything starts to come up, you would just hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. And here we are at the grub boot menu. And I'm simply going to hit E to open the command line. And then I'm going to go down until I see a line that starts with Linux. And then I will simply hit the end button on my keyboard to take me to the end of this line. Do space, type in single. Single, and hit enter. Type in single at the end of the line, hit Control X to reboot. There's all the process going on in the background. And we can press enter to enter maintenance or Control D to continue. I'm going to press enter. And we are the root user in the virtual machine. So now I'm going to type in run level. And it shows me as run level 1. The end says that that I have not had a previous run level since the last time it was rebooted. And to compare the run level in single user mode to when I'm logged in, let me exit this to reboot. Alright, here I am finally back logged in as my usual user self. One correction to what I said previously, you do not type in exit to get out of single user mode, we type in reboot because you want the system to reboot. But now that we are here, we're going to right click on the desktop and we're going to go to Open Terminal. And now the terminal is open, I'm going to do run level. And as you can see in my terminal, I'm a level 5 in this Ubuntu desktop image. This was like a CentOS server. My run level will probably say something like 3. That number varies depending on what distro of Linux you're running. A boot error can also be caused by the boot loader not being able to read the drive device. Now, typically this error is fatal, but sometimes you can recover from it. Sometimes you can use what's called a rescue disk. A rescue disk is a USB or CD that loads a small version of Linux into RAM. And because this Linux operating system is running in RAM, it leaves your hard drive free to be examined and repaired if needed. You can run diagnostics and even repair the hard drive all through the command prompt using a rescue disk. The command you're going to use is what's called a file system check command, and it's FSCK, and then the drive, the path, and then the drive that your boot system is loaded on. File system check command is a group of commands that are very specific to all the particular versions of Linux that are out there. And you'll run file system check something like FSCK space /dev/SDA2 if that's where your boot system is loaded onto. And it will examine the drive for errors, and then we'll come up with a prompt asking you if you want to repair errors are found, or it will tell you that no errors were found. And typically what you do is you just continue running the file system check until it comes back no errors. And then I personally say that it's good practice to run it at least one more time after it comes back with no errors, just to kind of double check everything. And then once you're satisfied that file system check has repaired any errors that were there, you can basically test it for yourself and look and see if anything is corrupted. And you do this by mounting it, by mounting your boot drive to something like the media directory. You'll run something like mount space /dev/SDA2 if that's where your boot drive is at, then space /media to mount it to media. Then once it's mounted to media, you can safely inspect it from the old kernel or in single user mode and see if there's anything corrupted on the system before booting it. Then once you're satisfied with it, you have to be sure to unmount it from the media directory. But then once it's unmounted, you just reboot the system and start it as normally, and hopefully it will start up completely. So in this lesson, I've prepared you some review questions that are in line with the CompTIA Plus objectives. First, what command parameter would you add to the end of the grub2 Linux command to force a Linux system to start in single user mode? Pause if you want to go back and look at the answer to this question. Second, what is the term commonly used for when the Linux system halts due to a system error? Again, pause if you need to go back and look for any errors. For the answer to these questions, these were discussed in here's your answers. Command parameter you would add to the end of the grub2 Linux command to force the Linux system to start in single user mode is the word single. The term that commonly used for when the Linux system halts due to a system error is kernel panic. Thank you, everybody, and I hope y'all can join me next time.